This is a wonderful facility that both Hare Prabhu and Alankar Prabhu have tirelessly been championing, two-men army, to make sure that we as a group read and follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions in terms of Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So thank you.
My mom's also in the kitchen.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh, okay. I just wanted to thank Hare Prabhu and Alankar Prabhu for setting the Sravanam Saturday and providing the facility for us to follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions about reading Srimad Bhagavatam every day. We'll start with Mangalacharan and then we'll get into the Bhagavatam. Om Ajnanatirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Mutamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Baddo Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suto Deve Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nastaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. Okay. Today we are reading from Canto 1, Chapter 13, text 29 through 37. Okay, so anytime we read the Srimad Bhagavatam, it always helps to know for us the setting behind the verses that we are about to read, like what led up to this stage. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes, to set the stage before we go on to the actual verses. And each of these verses have amazing purports. So if time allows, Prabhu, maybe we can read the purport. Okay. So the setting is Vidura, after his many pilgrimages, after receiving knowledge from Maitreya Muni, comes back to where the Pandavas are and finds Dhrtarastra and Gandhari in Yudhisthira's palace, taken care of wonderfully by all the Pandavas. And Vidura is very harsh. He points out to Dhritarashtra that he's getting old, he doesn't have much time. And his instructions to Dhritarashtra range from sarcasm, taunting, to earnest request to you have to take upon the spiritual path, and finally very convincing arguments to Dhritarashtra to leave the luxuries of the palace and go to the forest for meditation. And the verse right before what we are going to read is verse 28. And Vidura implores Dhritarashtra to leave to the north, the Himalayas, without letting his relatives know. And he says that since Kali Yuga is fast approaching and all good qualities of men will be diminished, so he should just let without knowing anyone, without letting anyone know. So the purport in that, Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada says that when one is frustrated in life, they can become a Dhira, someone who leaves home for good without communicating with relatives. And Vidura advised this was the way, because very quickly the age of Kali was approaching. All of us jivas conditioned by the material modes are already not in a pious state. And Vidura's argument was that the upcoming Kali Yuga is going to make things worse. And Vidura here makes a distinction between 2 points. One is a Dhira and the other is a Narottama. Hare Krishna Mataji. A Dhira is someone who's frustrated, doesn't let his family know, and leaves. Narottama, on the other hand, is a person who is fully dependent on Krishna. He's also living. He's also not letting his family members know. But in his heart, he knows that Krishna will take care of him. He's not anxious about what will happen when I leave. What arrangement should I do because I'm leaving? So Narottama is a much more elevated position than a Dhira. Can everyone be a Narottama? Srila Prabhupada answers that question that only one who is completely relieved of all taints of sinful acts, not even of all sinful acts, of all taints of sinful acts, can depend fully on Krishna. So he's saying we can't be Narottama now, but at least be a Dhira. That's what Vidura is telling to Dhrtarastra. So then we'll pick it up from text 29. Since we have 9 verses, Prabhujis, is it okay if we read, or would one of you like to read the verses too?
Whatever you feel.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Evam Raja Vidurena Jena Prajna Chakshur Bodhita Ajamidaha Chitvasveshu Sneha Pashan Dhradimno Nischakrama Bhratur Sandirshitadva. If I can have one of our volunteers read the word by word. Yes. Hari, Adai, please give.
Evam thus, Raja King Dhrtarastra, Vidurena Anujena, by his younger brother Vidura, Prajna introspect his knowledge, Chakshuhu eyes, Bodhitaha being understood, Ajamidaha Dhrtarastra, CM of the family of Ajamida, Chitva by breaking, Sveshu regarding kinsmen, Sneha Pashan strong network of affection, Dradimnaha because of steadfastness, Nishakrama got out, Brother by his brother, Sandarsita direction to, Adva the path of liberation.
Thank you, Junta Prabhu. The translation. Thus Maharaj Dhritarashtra, the scion of the family of Ajamida, firmly convinced by introspective knowledge or prajna, broke at once the strong network of familial affection by his resolute determination. Thus he immediately left home to set out on the path of liberation as directed by his younger brother Vidura. So we'll read the purport. There's amazing points in the purport. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the great preacher of the principles of Srimad Bhagavatam, has stressed the importance of association with sadhus or pure devotees of the Lord. He said that even by a moment's association with the pure devotee, one can achieve all perfection. We are not ashamed to admit that this fact was experienced in our practical life. Were we not favored by His Divine Grace Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj by our first meeting for a few minutes only, it would have been impossible for us to accept this mighty task of describing Srimad Bhagavatam in English. Without seeing him at that opportune moment, we could have become a very great business magnate, but never would we have been able to walk the path of liberation and be engaged in the factual service of the Lord under instructions of His Divine Grace. And here is another practical example by the action of Vidura's association with Dhritarashtra. Maharaj Dhritarashtra was tightly bound in a network of material affinities related to politics, economy, and family attachment, and he did everything in his power to achieve so-called success in his planned projects. But he was frustrated from the beginning to the end so far as his material activities were concerned. And yet, despite his life of failure, he achieved the greatest of all success in self-realization by the forceful instructions of a pure devotee of the Lord, who is the typical emblem of a sadhu. The scriptures enjoin therefore that one should associate with sadhus only, rejecting all other kinds of association, and by doing so one will have ample opportunity to hear the sadhus who can cut to pieces the bonds of illusory affection in the material world. It is a fact that the material world is a great illusion because everything appears to be a tangible reality, but at the next moment evaporates like the dashing foam of the sea or a cloud in the sky. A cloud in the sky undoubtedly appears to be a reality because it rains, and due to rain so many temporary green things appear. But in the ultimate issue, everything disappears, namely the cloud, rain, and green vegetation, all in due course. But the sky remains, and the varieties of sky or luminaries also remain forever. Similarly, the absolute truth, which is compared to the sky, remains eternally, and the temporary cloud-like illusion comes and goes away. Foolish living beings are attracted by the temporary cloud, but intelligent men are more concerned with the eternal sky with all its variegatedness. So what I was hoping to do today was share a little bit of my realizations. We can go around the room, all of you can share, and then we'll move on to the next verse. Does that sound good? Okay. So the point here Srila Prabhupada makes is that associating with sadhus can help provide us clarity. There are a lot of things to glean from this purport, and did you all notice that Srila Prabhupada said, were we not favored? He didn't say, was I not favored? He said, were we not favored to have the association of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati? And without that, it would have been impossible for us to accept the translation. Why is he saying us? He's the one who associated with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. He's the one who labored to translate this in English. But he's including, I think, all of us, all the devotees. Because Srila Prabhupada has said many times to the devotees in the beginning who gave their life, blood and sweat to the movement, he has even been tearful to them, like putting them in an exalted position and putting himself in a humble position. So that's very telling how Srila Prabhupada didn't, although he fully deserved to claim credit, he didn't do that. Even in that time, he gathered everyone as a group to say that. So that also is reflected in this purport. And we also learned that Vidura did not hold a grudge. Remember the circumstances under which he left Hastinapur. He was insulted by Duryodhana, and Dhrtarastra didn't speak a word. And many times in life, when someone hurts us, the other person that we trust who's silent, that hurts us more than whoever spoke the bad words. Because why didn't you speak up? That's what, like, you look at Dhruva, what made Dhruva leave was his dad was silent. And it would have been well within Vidura's right to hold a grudge against his brother. But he didn't keep all that. Well, once he went to the pilgrimages, he got realized knowledge from Maitreya Muni. He could have happily been in pilgrimages, but he came back because he cared so deeply about his brother. And Dhrtarastra also took the advice of his younger brother. Dhrtarastra was in a more helpless condition. Vidura had perfect eyes, so he could be in the forest and all that. But Dhrtarastra was blind. And he could have thought, like, what would happen to me if I go to the forest? I might not be safe. I have never been alone. I've always been dependent on someone. But he took a leap of faith. And we've all, every single one of us have been there. When we were first introduced to Krishna consciousness, it took a leap of faith on a sincere devotee. We may not have understood what we heard in the lectures, we may not even have been reading regularly, but it was some other devotee who inspired us. And we said, I don't know what this is, but I trust this person so implicitly, I'm going to take a leap of faith. And that's what Dhrtarastra did. He took a leap of faith on a sincere devotee. In many ways, we are also like Dhrtarastra. We have eyes that see, but our knowledge is not yet there, that we can see. And that's why our Mangalacharan always starts with Om Ajnana Timirandasya, because just like an eye surgeon removes the deformities in the eye, the Guru opens the eye of knowledge. So yeah, Dhrtarashtra, although he was in a more physically helpless and dependent position, he took a leap of faith. and that's how we and that's the point that Srila Prabhupada makes in this purport about how powerful devotee association is, particularly sadhu association is. And even in contemporary life, we hear quotations like, "Show me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are," right? Meaning, even in life outside of devotion, that's a fact. Like if you want to get very good in your chosen career, you will associate with people who you, in your mind, is successful. You will ask them, how did you handle the challenges? How did you persevere? And devotional service is no different. And we have to make it a point, and facilities like this, we have a roof over our head. We are serving Srimad Bhagavatam in front of Srila Prabhupada and the deities. After us listening to the amazing Jagannath Ashtakam, you can think, right, before you came here, so many things would have been running in your mind. But once you're here, that atmosphere helps you focus, and ideally we should be reading Bhagavatam every day sincerely, but at least one day of the week we should start. And that's why this kind of facility provides congregation members to have that association with sadhus. People like you who are more diligent, more spending more time with the Srimad Bhagavatam, and by us associating with you, all of us will benefit. So similarly in the spiritual path, we need to be very mindful. We need to be on the lookout for opportunities when we have traveling sadhus come to our congregation, to make it a point to be there as much as to the extent possible. So I'll pause here and see if anyone wants to share reflections.
I think going back to the point of we, I think another interpretation of that was Prabhupada wanted us to he could have said I to go for his Guru Maharaj, but the fact that it's we includes all of us are following his Guru Maharaj and by extension the Parampara. So it's not Prabhupada came, a lot is a huge concern, especially when he took the title Prabhupada, when he accepted that title. A lot of his godbrothers are oh, you're putting yourself in a higher position, you're not really connected anymore to Pakistan Saraswati Thakur. But by saying we, he includes all of us as following not only Prabhupada, but his own Guru Maharaj and by connection to the rest of the Prabhupada. So that's another interpretation. It's we are all supposed to be following Pakistan Saraswati Thakur, who follows the rest of the Guru Parampara. So we're still connected. He's trying to make sure and emphasize that connection.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
I like what you said about show me who your friends are, I'll tell you who you are. And I like how you connected it with how we choose a career. Same thing with devotional life. We take Sangha of, we want to take Sangha of two types of people. People, let's say we're in a classroom setting, people who are in the class and getting ready for the exam. Those people, we want to help each other out, that's like-minded association. Those who, we haven't taken the exam yet, but we want to get, especially the association of people who have taken the exam already. So they can tell us, oh, yeah, you got to study this, you have to study this, and study this. So we take association of like-minded devotees, equals, and make friendships with them. But our focus also should be on serving the Mahatmas and serving the pure devotees, because they have passed the exam, so they can tell us some ways on how to pass the exam.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anyone else? Mataji? Okay. Yes, Guru.
I was also reflecting on your point about associating with pure devotees and those who are against us. It takes a lot of humility to even identify that not that someone is higher, but to identify that I am the lower. Instead of judging others, we should even look at ourselves and say that no, all right, no, I know a lot of things, a lot of services, a lot of seva, a lot of kirtan, a lot of IT stuff. But that doesn't make me a sadhu. Because sadhu's definition is also given in Srimad Bhagavatam, that he is the most tolerant, he is the most merciful, he is the most friendly to all the living entities, and he is always looking to help others in getting closer to Krishna. That is the definition of Tiksava Karamika. So, and you reminded me of that a class given by Adi
Adi Gadadhar Prabhu?
Adi Gadadhar Prabhu, yes. 2 years ago, Nityananda Triyodashi, he gave an online class here. So he was saying that we sometimes use the word sadhu very lightly, but the word sadhu is so high. We are sadhakas, we are not sadhus. And that's where we have to identify that yes, we have to help each other in getting to that level of a sadhu.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Gurudeva Prabhu or Chanakapani Prabhu, anyone wants to add? Sometimes I find that even reading Bhagavatam, it's hard to do it on your own, but if you're part of a group, then it becomes much more easier because you're sharing realizations. I've recently started reading Bhagavatam with a friend at work, and it's given during the workday we block some time and read quickly. But in the morning, Gurudeva Prabhu reads Bhagavatam from the 10th canto. At 5 o'clock, Prince Hindu Prabhu's Japa, actually that call starts at 3:30, but they read every day. So although we are a growing congregation, even in the small congregation, we have so many opportunities where it's hard for us, but that tide will lift our boat too, simply because we are in that association. So I think we should also take, they say that it takes 30 days or 60 days to form a habit. So I think we can start somewhere. 30 days, show up to one of these associations, and then eventually it becomes part of your life. Then it's like chanting. Your day is messed up when you don't chant. Yeah. So, okay, thank you. And, okay, the next one is verse 30. Patim prayantam subalashya putri pati vrata chanuja jagama sadvi himalayam nyasta danda praharsham manasvinam iva satsam praharaha. Another volunteer to read the word by word translation.
Patim, her husband. Prayantam, while leaving home. Subhalasya, of King Subhala. Putri, the worthy daughter. Pati Vrata, devoted to her husband. Cha, also. Anu Jagama, followed. Sadhvi, chaste. Himalayam, toward the Himalayan mountains. Nyastadanda, one who has accepted the rod of the renounced order. Praharsham, object of delight. Manasvinam, of the great fighters. Eva, like. Sat, legitimate. Sampraharaha, good lashing.
Translation. The gentle and chaste Gandhari, who was the daughter of King Subala of Kandahar or Gandhara, followed her husband, seeing that he was going to the Himalaya mountains, which are the delight of those who have accepted the staff of the renounced order, like fighters who have accepted a good lashing from the enemy. Prabhu, since it's the long weekend, do we have a time bound or we can read the purport? We can read? Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's important to read the purports, so yeah. Saubalini or Gandhari, daughter of King Subala and wife of King Dhrtarastra, was ideal as a wife devoted to her husband. The Vedic civilization especially prepares chaste and devoted wives, of whom Gandhari is one amongst many mentioned in history. Lakshmi Ji Sita Devi was also a daughter of a great king, but she followed her husband Lord Ramachandra into the forest. Similarly, as a woman, Gandhari could have remained at home or at her father's house, but as a chaste and gentle lady, she followed her husband without consideration. Instructions for the renounced order of life were imparted to Dhritarashtra by Vidura, and Gandhari was by the side of her husband. But he did not ask her to follow him because he was at that time fully determined, like a great warrior who faces all kinds of dangers in the battlefield. He was no longer attracted to so-called wife or relatives, and he decided to start alone. But as a chaste lady, Gandhari decided to follow her husband till the last moment. Maharaj Dhritarashtra accepted the order of Vanaprastha, and at this stage the wife is allowed to remain as a voluntary servitor. But in the sannyasa stage, no wife can stay with her former husband. A sannyasi is considered to be a dead man civilly, and therefore the wife becomes a civil widow without connection with her former husband. Maharaj Dhrtarastra did not deny his faithful wife, and she followed her husband at her own risk. The sannyasis accept a rod as the sign of the renounced order of life. There are two types of sannyasis. Those who follow the Mayavadi philosophy headed by Sripad Shankaracharya accept only one rod, Ekadanda, but those who follow the Vaishnavite philosophy accept three combined rods, Sri Danda. The Mayavadi sannyasis are Ekadandi Swamis, whereas the Vaishnava sannyasis are known as Tridandi Swamis, or more distinctly Tridandi Goswamis, in order to be distinguished from the Mayavadi philosophers. The Ekadandi Swamis are mostly fond of the Himalayas, but the Vaishnava sannyasis are fond of Vrindavan and Puri. The Vaishnava sannyasis are Narottamas, whereas the Mayavadi sannyasis are Dhiras. Maharaj Yudhisthira was advised to follow the Dhiras because at that stage it was difficult for him to become a Narottama. So we remember at the beginning we talked about the difference between Dhira and Narottama. So without that context it would have been hard to understand this purport. Yeah. So the point here is, although there were rules like this is how one is supposed to be in Vanaprastha, this is how one is supposed to be in Sannyasa, you can see that when the intent is clear and there is devotion, there's always exceptions. In a sense, Gandhari was equally helpless, but it's because she was blind by choice. So now there are two blind people in the forest, which is even more challenging. And she also could have thought, I'm comfortable here, or she could have made any other decision. But she chose to follow him, although he didn't ask her to follow. And you can see that in the Ramayana too. Rama didn't ask Sita to come. She just said, what am I going to do here if you're in the forest, and followed. So, in a Christian marriage ceremony when they take vows, and even in a Vedic marriage ceremony when they are circling the fire, there's always a line that says, in sickness and in health, no matter what, I will be with you. And you can see that these are examples of that. At this time, Dhrtarastra was also very resolute in his determination, and he was single-pointed, so he was getting ready to go to the forest. And here Srila Prabhupada makes the difference between the Ekadanda Swamis and the Tridandi Goswamis. Goswamis are those who have controlled their senses, and Tridandi is all three, body, mind and heart, words, everything is towards service of Krishna and fully dependent on Krishna. And then he again makes the point that Dhira is those who are just frustrated out of material life. They want to escape this world. They are leaving. Whereas Sannyasis are Narottamas. They don't just reject the world for the sake of rejecting it. Wherever they go, they engage in the service of the Lord, like Srila Prabhupada and all the Sannyasis in our tradition. That's one thing I wanted to say. Anyone else wants to share realizations?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of speakers, we have this large focus on anartha nivritti, right? Purifying ourselves. But a lot of speakers will say anartha nivritti is good, we should consider that. But our bigger focus should be artha pravritti or Krishna pravritti. Not just getting rid of our but developing love for Krishna, attachment for Krishna. So that's kind of the point here, because the Mayavadas, they are trying to get liberation. They are just trying to detach themselves from this world. They have no conception or focus on where they're going. They just want to not be here. But the Vaishnavas are different. That's what differentiates us, because we are not so much focused on leaving this world as we are developing Krishna praying. Even it says in Shikshashika it says Mama Janmani Janmani Ishvare. We're allowed to, we can even stay in this world, but the condition is that we get bhakti towards Krishna. So the point is not the reason why a Narottama is higher than Adira is they haven't just attached, they've also attached to a higher thing. Like Paramdishwani, right? They've gone to a higher goal. But those who are just rejecting it, they haven't attached to something. Prabhupada gives an example of his classes. It was related to the Apollo mission, and he said, if you have a rocket and you just go up in space and that rocket doesn't take shelter of anything, it'll just fall out. But unless that rocket takes shelter of something, that's the only way it'll be successful. So if we aren't when we remove one attachment, if we don't go to a superior attachment, we're gonna fall back or regress. So.
Anyone else wants to share? Okay. Okay. Ajata Shatru Krita Maitru Kuta Vipran Natva Tilago Bhumi Rukmaihi Graham Pravishto Guru Vandanaya Nacha Pasya Pitarau Saubhalincha. Can someone read the word by word?
Ajata, never born. Shatru, enemy. Krita, having performed. Maitra, worshipping the demigods. Kuta, Agni, and offering fuel in the fire. Vipran, the Brahmanas. Natva, offering obeisances. Tila, go, Rumi, Rukmay, along with grains, cows, land, and gold. Graham, within the palace. Pravishta, having entered into. Guru Vandana, for offering respect to the elderly members. Na, did not. Cha, also. Apasya, see. Pitrao, his uncles. Saubhalin, Gandhari. Cha, also.
Thank you, Prabhu. Translation. Maharaj Yudhisthira, whose enemy was never born, performed his daily morning duties by praying, offering fire sacrifice to the sun god, and offering obeisances, grains, cows, land, and gold to the Brahmanas. He then entered the palace to pay respects to the elderly. However, he could not find his uncles or aunt, the daughter of King Subala. Purport. Maharaj Yudhisthira was the most pious king because he personally practiced daily the pious duties for the householders. The householders are required to rise early in the morning, and after bathing they should offer respects to the deities at home by prayers, by offering fuel in the sacred fire, by giving the Brahmanas in charity, land, cows, grains, gold, etc. And at last offering to the elderly members due respects and obeisances. One who is not prepared to practice injunctions prescribed in the Shastras cannot be a good man simply by book knowledge. Modern householders are practiced to different modes of life, namely to rise late and then take bed tea without any sort of cleanliness and without any purificatory practices as mentioned above. The household children are taken to practice what the parents practice, and therefore the whole generation glides towards hell. Nothing good can be expected from them unless they associate with sadhus. Like Dhrtarastra, the materialistic person may take lessons from a sadhu like Vidura and thus be cleansed of the effects of modern life. Maharaj Yudhisthira, however, could not find in the palace his two uncles, namely Dhrtarastra and Vidura, along with Gandhari, the daughter of King Subala. He was anxious to see them and therefore asked Sanjaya, the private secretary of Dhrtarastra. So here Srila Prabhupada, like sometimes when you read what the householders back in the day did, it seems like wow. But that was a different age, at least for us. Rising early, finishing our rounds before the day begins, to the extent having a morning program to the extent possible, but finishing our rounds before 6 or 6:30. I think that's the bare minimum we can do to make sure that our day starts out with our priorities straight. So I'll pause here. Does anyone want to share anything?
I could go from the first one with about the association.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, like here, we don't get that kind of association that what we expect in town.
Mm-hmm.
But the quick progress in Christian life, His Holiness Jayapataka Swami told that any pure devotee, if you wash their lotus feet, run the water, eat the dust, and eat the rivers. Three things if you do, it's like a medicine. And next is Dhira and Sridandi. I understand Dhira for those who have no time, who will give up on. For them, they step in the Dhira because they have no time, they didn't practice. That's the reason I think Dhira is such having a choice more than
They have no choice. No.
Sridandi, they are doing and they are helping other and it's going long. They are already on that path.
Okay. Thank you, Mataji.
I related to the verse in this Yashastram Vidumutsrijya Vartate Kamakarata Nasasukim Navartati Nasukam Naparamita. This is the end of second to last verse of the 16th chapter of Gita. It basically says Yashastram, one who discards scriptural injunctions vartate kamakarata nasa siddhim na sukam na parangati. That even though they think they're happier by not following the injunctions, actually doesn't lead to the goal, neither does it make them happy. You know, so actually all these scriptural injunctions are given to us for our benefit, you know, our to protect our bhakti lata bij. All these scriptural injunctions are there. Now some things the acharyas may consider in this age, they can adjust, but they never throw away some things as it's not true, not real, and anything like that. So by trying to follow these scriptural injunctions, you know, Prabhupada's saying, rising early in the morning, bathing, offering the obeisance to the deities, doing your sadhana, giving the brahmanas in charity land, cows and grains and gold. I mean, you can do that once in a while. but you know, chanting your rounds, you know, and reading the Bhagavatam every morning, that's like an integral part of our morning and our day, you know. So I think by endeavoring to always follow these scriptural injunctions, I think that would be the safest way to practice Krishna consciousness.
Absolutely. And sometimes people question a lot, like why, and why should we do this? Why does it say that? Why this? Why that? And I'm speaking from personal experience. You can approach it in a very scientific way. They can just try for a month. Nothing is lost. In science, you have a hypothesis, you do an experiment, and you come up with your own conclusion. Do that. Wake up early every day, or at least 3 or 4 times a week, and see what does to one's own consciousness. So, so that's sometimes a way that we can help other people. You know, when they ask why, it's like I mentioned earlier. At some point, you have to take a leap of faith, because this is that kind of process that unless you do it, you can listen to a lot of lectures, but unless you do it, you're never going to get the benefit. Same thing, listening to lectures is very important, but it shouldn't happen at the expense of reading Bhagavatam yourself. This is one point His Grace Gokuleshwar Prabhu made when he came to Columbus. You should absolutely listen to lectures, but that shouldn't be a replacement for you yourself reading the Bhagavatam. Because when you read the Bhagavatam, you get your own realizations. That is also important. And so both should be there. You should listen from sadhus, but you should also make it a point to read and write your own. So yes, and that's one thing that when we all think about our life pre-Krishna consciousness, one thing we can say that we are a lot more disciplined than we were before. We are a lot more mindful and conscious of everything in our life, conscious of time, how much time we have, how we should spend that time. So yeah. Anyone else want to share?
I just want to like this point. Some Prabhupada mentioned only one is called, if you don't like it bitter, if you eat every day in bitter, but your stomach, your body is purifying your blood.
Yeah.
If you doesn't like, because so many people doesn't like bitter, but if you doesn't like, still you can eat in bitter. Your blood in your body is purified.
Yeah.
Same like if you doesn't understand this Gita study, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, but if you listen and does like it, not doesn't like it, still if you read, this is your benefit.
Exactly. Yes, Prabhu. And the Gita says, right, what's nectar in the beginning is poison at the end, what feels like poison is nectar at the end. And going back to what you said, even if people don't have the time to sit and read, they can at least listen. We have the entire Srimad Bhagavatam with purports on YouTube as an audiobook. When you're driving, you can listen. How much more simple can this movement make for us to read Bhagavatam? Writing this was hard, and he already did it.
Yeah.
And if we come up with excuses for not reading, then who can help us? So I think we all have some time when we drive, we are listening to something. Instead of that, we can listen to this, and that kind of stays with you. And when you listen to something and then you read, you'll be amazed at how much has already registered in your subtle mind. So when you're reading something to which you already listen, you have that familiarity. Oh, I know this before, I learned this before. And that helps you in retention. Otherwise, sometimes we get frustrated, right? I read all this, I don't remember anything. What's the point? Sometimes we get frustrated with that too. So trying to, as Hare Krishna Prabhu said in his initiation vow, to systematically study Srila Prabhupada. It's not enough to study Srila Prabhupada's books. You have to systematically study. Just like how whenever we were in college, we didn't just whimsically study. We took so much notes, we had flashcards everywhere, wherever we were, all that material would seep in. Like we take so much Shraddha to study that, right? Similar Shraddha we have to take in this one too.
I have so many, most of the Srila Prabhupada lecture, there is the Sanskrit, the word this one is Musna Bos Pargita, Rosna Ros Khatita. That kind of Prabhupada, because the word Prabhupada is used. That is the meaning of I'm translating for.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Prabhu. Next is Tatra Sanjayam Ashina Paprachod Vigna Manasaha Gaval Ganekva Nastato Vriddho Hinascha Netrayaho. Anyone wants to read the word by word?
Tatra, here. Sanjayam, unto Sanjaya. Asinam, sitting. Prapachana, he inquired from, and beware, Manasa, fight with energy. Cleveland, the son of the Cleveland, Sanjaya Kwa, where is now our Tattva, Angel, Vada, old, Hinam, Cha, and gift of Naraya, the eyes.
Thank you, Prabhu. Maharaj Yudhisthira, full of anxiety, turned to Sanjaya, who was sitting there, and said, "O Sanjaya, where is our uncle who is old and blind?" Ambacha hata putrartha pitruvyakva gata suhut apimai akrita pragne hata bandhuhu sabharyaya asamsamana shamalam gangayam dukkito patat. I want another volunteer. Prabhu, you can read.
Mother aunt, Cha, and Hata Putra, who had lost all her sons. Artha, in a sorry plight. Prithvya, Uncle Vidura. Kwa, where? Gadha, gone. Sutra, well-wisher. Api, whether? Mai, on to me. Akrata, Pragne, ungrateful. Hata Bandhu, one who has lost all his sons. Saha, Dhrtarastra, Brahaya, with his wife. Asamsamanaha, in doubtful mind. Samalam, offenses. Gangayam, in the Ganges water. Dukhitaha, in distressed mind. Apatat, fell down.
Thank you, Prabhu. Where is my well-wisher, Uncle Vidura, and Mother Gandhari, who is very afflicted due to all her sons' demise? My uncle Dhrtarastra was also very mortified due to the death of all his sons and grandsons. Undoubtedly, I am very ungrateful. Did he therefore take my offences very seriously and along with his wife drown himself in the Ganges? Ganga. Purport. The Pandavas, especially Maharaj Yudhisthira and Arjuna, anticipated the after effects of the battle of Kurukshetra, and therefore Arjuna declined to execute the fighting. The fight was executed by the will of the Lord, but the effects of family agreement, as they had thought of it before, had come to be true. Maharaj Yudhisthira was always conscious of the great plight of his uncle Dhrtarastra and Aunt Gandhari, and therefore he took all possible care of them in their old age and agreed conditions. When therefore he could not find his uncle and aunt in the palace, naturally his doubts arose, and he conjectured that they had gone down to the water of the Ganga. He thought himself ungrateful because when the Pandavas were fatherless, Maharaj Dhrtarastra had given them all royal facilities to live, and in return he had killed all Dhrtarashtra's sons in the battle of Kurukshetra. As a pious man, Maharaj Yudhisthira took into account all his unavoidable misdeeds, and he never thought of the misdeeds of his uncle and company. Dhritarashtra had suffered the effects of his own misdeeds by the will of the Lord, But Maharaj Yudhisthira was thinking only of his own unavoidable misdeeds. That is the nature of a good man and devotee of the Lord. A devotee never finds fault with others but tries to find his own and thus rectify them as far as possible. This is a dense purport, right? Because we all know the story of Mahabharata and what they all endured and how Dhrtarastra was, by being silent when Duryodhana perpetrated these miseries, in a sense he sanctioned it, all the way to Draupadi's humiliation, or trying to humiliate Draupadi. But Yudhishthira is not remembering all that. He's saying that it feels like can't even comprehend that level of humility. And he's blaming himself. And Srila Prabhupada writes that that's how a devotee would be, never finds fault with others but tries to find his own and thus rectify them as far as possible. This goes back to the point Alankar Prabhu made earlier about sadhu and sadhaka, how we should always be looking inward. And the more we practice bhakti, that's probably a sign that we are progressing on the spiritual path. When things around us, we notice less, but we notice more our own issues. And that we have our own issues, and God knows how many lifetimes it's going to take to fix this. Why should we waste neurons and time in trying to point out others' faults or having even an opinion on them? Because that does pollute your consciousness. Then it agitates you, it disturbs your chanting. None of it is worth it. Let's just look inward. So, and many, although we can, sometimes some people might read this purport and say, well, that was Yudhishthira. Like, we can't do that. But we should at least have a desire to aspire to be like that. And also imagine how awkward the situation would have been. Both the same family, the Pandavas, because of they tried very hard to avoid the battle and all that, but still it happened. Not even one of her sons out of her 100 sons lived. Imagine how awkward all of us have been while we are growing up, being part of witnessing family disputes. And when you go to a marriage, you'll see like those two sides won't even talk to each other, right? But here Yudhishthira was taking care of them, and in a way that they didn't feel bad, didn't bring up like old dirt up, none of that, right? He was able to transcend it all, and that's the sign of a devotee. So, and even when this happens, he's still blaming himself, not thinking of an alternative explanation. And this is why Vidura said, leave without letting your relatives know. Because imagine Dhrtarastra would let his relatives know, how that conversation would have gone. What will you do alone in the forest blind? Just stay with us. Did we do anything? Let's try to fix it. This is why Vidura said, leave without letting your relatives know. So, because the bonds of family affection are strong. And yeah, so anyone else wants to share based on this?
I just have a question. So about just drawing the boundary of where to become as humble, as tolerant, and as sadhu like Yudhisthira versus there are many examples also Arjuna himself where when someone comes hits at you, you hit back. And protect your vows, your instructions. And many times that happens, that there are conflicts, and it's best to just keep it that way instead of being humble and do this come, do this come. I accept defeat.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's also not that.
Yeah. Krish Prabhu and I were talking about this very topic this last week, and Krish Prabhu was telling me that a simple formula that he uses about when to respond and when to let go is this activity taking me closer to Krishna? Or is this person taking me closer to Krishna? If and there's other places there's more in third canto and in once Parikshit comes, there's always something about, for people that you think are similar to you, you practice devoted friendship. For people that in your opinion may not be taking you closer to Krishna, you be compassionate to them and say a prayer for them. And for people like sadhus that you feel like you can learn so much, you respect them with a lot of reverence. Parikshit says that, Dhruva Maharaj says that, Kapila Muni says that to Mother Devahuti. That point is repeated so many times in the Bhagavatam. So when something is repeated that often, you feel like this is a very important point. And you're right, people come in variegated shapes. The same person who's upsetting you may be a best friend to someone else. The same person that person might be taking someone else closer to Krishna. But because of our different conditionings, that not chemistry is not the right word. What's the right word? That fit might not be there. And first, I don't think I have any qualification to give this answer, but in my humble opinion, because we face this even at work too. It's not like you have the same warm fuzzy feeling to everyone. So I think the best way is to say, I can spend a lot of energy trying to fight back, or I can, with my body language or words, make a statement that Haribol, Prabhu, Haribol, and then move on. And hopefully the other person will understand. I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's good to know. There's a saying in English, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So I think it's also imperative on us to understand what is disturbing us and who might be disturbing us. And once you know that, to limit our interactions to one of respect and not create more opportunity to put ourselves in a situation again. If you know that situation will cause conflict, why go there? Right? That's also another way to think about it. Anyone else? This is a very loaded question, so. Yes, Prabhu.
I didn't have a point on a comment you made about this, that we make this argument that is Yudhisthira Maharaj, that is Vidura. Even after we go down the line, Lord Chaitanya came to teach us how to perform devotional service, how it looked like. Then we say, that's Lord Chaitanya. And then we go down the line, that's Prabhupada, And then we go to our Guru, that's our Guru, But there's this difference between Anukaran and Anusharan. Anukaran means following exactly, is imitating what they do. But Anusharan is to take the principles that they uphold and then apply them to our lives. So we all must do Anusharan of Vidura, of Yudhisthira, Lord Chaitanya, of Prabhupada. So we have to get, as Mahatmanas to Mahamparta, Devim Prakrita Ashrita, that we have to take shelter of the Mahatmas and we have to follow exactly how they follow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Absolutely. And we do that already in our career and education. We would never say, oh, that person got 99%, that's that person. You would never say that.
Yeah. It's only
right? We would work so hard to get that. So here we are just saying, do the same thing in spiritual life.
Yeah.
And while you were responding, I was reminded of another point, Alankar Prabhu. In the book, I'll Build You a Temple, there's that scene where Mr. Nair sends people to demolish the temple. And I forget the Prabhu who was defending. He was I think he was an engineer, and he was a community leader, and he brought his gun. And so the Gundas who came to hit, he told them, there are 128 bullets in this. There are only 60 people here, go bring more people. Right? So to me, you have to fight the good fight. When it matters, you have to fight the good fight. You can't shrink away at that time. But it then depends on what is that fight for. Is the fight for Krishna, or is the fight to establish superiority of my thought and action? Or is the fight to defend my thought and action? If the fight is for Krishna, that Prabhu was fighting for the temple. And he gave it as good as he got. Right? To the people who are ruffians, you can't go and say, building a temple is important. They are not in that mood to listen to that. So he handled them in a way that they could listen. And they all ran away. When they saw that, they all ran away. And overnight, they built the temple before They built a temporary structure before the court opened on Monday morning. So I think that book is a great example of how you handle those situations. And there's also a situation where someone was extremely disrespectful to His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj. Extremely disrespectful, like we can't even think how. But he didn't fight back. He just stood there, said Vancha Kalpataru, bless your prayers, and walked away. And not all of us can be at that level, but I think sometimes we can also think about, if I respond, is this going to inflame the situation even more worse? Because at some level, and Srila Prabhupada has said that, as devotees we are all ambassadors of Krishna consciousness. How we conduct ourselves outside and inside is just as important. If we are so judgmental that people are scared when they come, because then we use a danda to beat them on, you're doing this, you're eating that, you're eating this, then no one will want to hear Krishna's message. Right? So I think we have to be very mindful about, I forget the verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Rahul might know, this is where Rupa Goswami tells Haridas Thakur, some people are good in prachar but not great in achar. Some people are good in achar, some are not great in prachar. But you are great in both. That's why you are Tumi Sarva Guru, Tumi Sarva Guru. So that tells us that our own personal sadhana alone may not be important, but our Vaishnava achar, sadachar, etiquette, that is just as important to reach Krishna Prema. And we can't behave one way to devotees and one way to other people. Imagine a community that has so much conflicts and a new person walks in. Why would they want to join that community? If they see that there is so much dysfunction, that people are reading one thing, saying one thing, but their activity doesn't reflect. And Srila Prabhupada defines truthfulness in the Bhagavad Gita in the 16th chapter. Truthfulness is when you can even speak the truth to an enemy. That you're so upstanding, that you have such integrity, that you can speak to the truth to even someone that you don't see eye to eye. And that's a very freeing way to live. But it takes time to get to that place. And we know ourselves where we are in that ladder. And go from there.
Honestly, that's the only issue that I see in that point is that, when the anger takes over in those situations, all of that is out of the window.
Yes. Yes.
Am I taking this person closer to Krishna, or am I getting closer to Krishna? Is this Prabhupada's instruction? Am I in this movement for this? None of that matters, right? At that point, when that anger takes over.
Yeah.
And I think what the point that you made, about achar and prachar and sadachar, I think that's what makes the most
Convincing.
Yeah, at least for those like me at very neophyte stage where, forget everything. There is a concept, forget everything, just step out, focus on your sadhana, focus on your service, do whatever best you can, and that's okay.
Yeah.
People, because that's the problem starts when we have our own faults, but we are so focused on other people's faults that we become Mahatmas by ourselves.
Or we think a service could be done better, but that other person did the service. We have an opinion. We didn't do it. Someone else actually did it. So what gives us the right to go and say that, or at least at that moment, right? And I asked the same question one time to His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj. And how do you handle a situation where you don't have authority? We're not in the temple council. We don't have authority. But you're seeing something happen. How do you handle that situation? And Maharaj said, sometimes it's good to do that tranquility prayer. You've heard that prayer in Alcoholics Anonymous. They have, please give me the courage to accept things I cannot change. No. Please give me the wisdom to accept things that I cannot change. The courage to change the things that are within my control. And the wisdom to know the difference. That's the serenity prayer. And I think in coaching, we have a coach through work, they give a coach. And one of the things the coach says is to identify your triggers. Because like you said, in the heat of the moment, all this will go out of the window. It's raw emotion, it's very visceral. Your brain is not thinking, it's just reacting. But you can, when you are in, before you get to that stage, there's a lot of stages that it builds up. It's never one thing. But sitting down, reflecting on what are our triggers and what makes us tick. I think it's very helpful to recognize when we have those triggers. Okay, if this thing is a trigger, then when that happens, you can think of some prayer or some affirmation. His Holiness Mahatma Das Prabhu is all about affirmations. It's amazing. Before you sit down and chant, if you tell yourself, I have 24 hours in the day, but these 2 hours are for Krishna. I'm not going to think about my to-do list. I'm not going to think about my responsibilities at work, what we are going to eat for breakfast. None of that I'm going to think. These 2 hours for Krishna. It's almost like your brain, your mind actually listens to you. So having like 2 or 3 affirmations, when you have that trigger, will go a long way. And His Holiness Vaisheshika Prabhu says he always carries a notebook. I just went out and got a notebook, like to write things like that you can always hold on to and remember. But it goes with the principle of insight. All these books are meant to give us insight into why we behave the way we do. And the more insight we have, the better our reaction will be to provoking situations.
And then also, I mean, I think like in general, like 2 of the processes of surrender are accepting what's favorable to devotional service and rejecting what's unfavorable. And that's like kind of the frame we can view it in, like to distinguish like between like what's good and what's like what fight to take up and what fight not to take up. Is it favorable to like my execution of bhakti? Then like fight as hard as you can. Even Krishna says like Arjuna just like the only reason Arjuna fights is because Krishna wants him to satisfy Krishna. So it's based on like the context, the situation, and like that's like if it'll help your bhakti. That has to be the bottom line. Like serving Krishna has to be the bottom line, and whatever like fits that narrative has to be the thing you do.
Absolutely. That's why the Bhagavad Gita was spoken in the battlefield, right? It was not spoken in a park. It was, imagine a battlefield, everyone is assembled, and suddenly he drops his bow. How it would have been. So that's why even in our scriptures, in Bhagavatam, like Prabhupada gives that analogy of sky and clouds, sun and clouds, water and reflection. Every verse in the Bhagavatam, it has an analogy that you look at and use every day. So why does the Bhagavatam give you day-to-day analogies? Because we can, when we see a worm on a leaf, we can remember the verse in the Bhagavatam where it says transmigration of the soul, just like the worm goes from one leaf to another. And Srila Prabhupada, there's a verse saying, when you walk, you take one step up, and right, like that, the soul transmigrates from one body to another. So these are all meant for us to remember. When we see the sky, a bud that forms, when you plant a seed in your garden, you can think about Bhakti Lata Beach. Everything in the Bhagavatam, it's around you. It's meant to rekindle your memory of what you learned. Anyway, I think I digressed, but yeah. Did that long-winded answer serve your question? Okay.
No, definitely. This is not black and white.
It's very nuanced, yeah.
So, context is right. So,
And
and there are so many right answers. There is not one right answer.
absolutely. And also one good rule of thumb, Prabhu, is always to have at least one congregation member that you can be fully vulnerable to and share. And say, Prabhu, this happened. You know me well. Tell me, what did I do wrong? And when that person tells the truth, that we have the humility to accept it. Not argue with them about, but this happened, that happened. So sometimes we all have Guru Maharajas, but we also feel like, why are we wasting time by asking this simple thing? We don't need to waste that time. They have so many things to do. But identifying so many Shiksha Gurus, like His Holiness Kalkanta Prabhu, he is so accessible. You can ask him anything and you know he won't judge you, right? So having those figures in your life, but sometimes even praying to Krishna, like this is bothering me. give me the intelligence of how to handle this. And then you'll be amazed. You'll get one email from Haraj or some post on WhatsApp in ISKCON Congress that will have the answer to that question that was bothering you. Krishna reciprocates in many ways. So, but we need to be attentive enough to listen when those answers come.
Another one way also, my Guru always tell, every day what you do to come in front of the deities.
Yes.
If you explain how many people I can speak lying and wrong and good thing, if you telling in front of deity, explain to deities, then deities reciprocate with you more and you surrender. Then Krishna is giving to intelligence.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. And that's where journaling comes. I don't know how many of you are journaling. You are wonderful. Rahul, wonderful. I'm not. My wonderful Prabhu. Yeah, I'm doing once a week. So. Okay, Prabhu, we have 8 more minutes. Is it okay if we finish or we want to pause?
I think we are over time.
Okay.
One more.
One more verse?
If you think, like, do you have anything specific in the rest of the verses, or should we just continue the sequence?
How about we do this? How about we just read the verse and the translation? That way we can stick with your schedule, and then many of the points that we are already covered. Okay. So, okay. Now we'll go to 34. Pitari uparate pandau sarvana suhda sishum arakshatam vyasanaktaha pitravyukva gata itaha. When my father Pandu fell down and we were all small children, these two uncles gave us protection from all kinds of calamities. They were always our good well-wishers. Alas, where have they gone from here? Suta uvacha kripaya sneha vaiklavyat suto viraha kashitaha Atmeshwaram achakshano na pratyahati piditaha. Suta Goswami said, because of compassion and mental agitation, Sanjaya, not having seen his own master Dhrtarastra, was aggrieved and could not properly reply to Maharaj Yudhisthira. Vimrijaya shruni panibhyam vistabhyatmanam atmana ajata shatrum pratyuche Prabhupada Anusmaran. First, he slowly pacified his mind by intelligence and wiping away his tears and thinking of the feet of his master, Dhrtarastra, he began to reply to Maharaj Yudhisthira. The he here is Sanjaya. Sanjaya uvacha naham veda vyavasitam pitror vakula nandana gandharyava mahabaho mushitosmi mahatma bihi. Sanjaya said, my dear descendant of the Kuru dynasty, I have no information of the determination of your two uncles and Gandhari. O king, I have been cheated by those great souls. So there's one important point in that purport, which is, imagine how Sanjaya and Yudhisthira would have felt, like they left without even telling them, right? So sometimes when many of us come to Krishna consciousness, your family members are not always happy or supportive. And at some point you may not have told lies, but you may not have told the truth either, right? You may have come to temple, they may not know. And here Srila Prabhupada says that that is okay, because you're doing it for Krishna's service. And eventually the same family members that were opposing will eventually accept that this was the right thing to do. But in the beginning you have to overcome that resistance. If you're lucky where your whole family is fully supportive, Jai. But if you're not in that situation, you have to make those decisions and take a leap of faith that they will also see the wisdom in this path. They may not see it today, but they will eventually see it. So that was a summary of all these verses. Thank you for the opportunity.
Srimad Bhagavatam Ki
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada Ki
Jai.
Sumithira